Today's scripture reading comes from Mark 10, 13 through 16, and I'm going to be reading from the Message. The people brought children to Jesus, hoping he might touch them. The disciples shooed them away, but Jesus was irate and let them know it. Don't push these children away. Don't ever get between them and me. These children are at the very center of life in the kingdom. Mark this: unless you accept God's kingdom in the simplicity of a child, you'll never get in. Then, gathering the children up in his arms, he laid his hands of blessing on them. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. The second scripture for today continues on to the passages in Mark. And it's all about the order of how the disciples saw themselves and who should be in power. Good news for the invisible. And we don't have the scripture up there, so I'm going to grab it. And I'm going to read out of the kids' Bible because I think that's important for today, out of Mark 10. Continuing on with the disciples' discussions of who should be first. If you want to get your pew Bibles out or your phones, it's a great way to follow along. And I really appreciate that Tom has been inviting us to do so. And guess what? This text is way too small for me. I can't read it. Let me grab my glasses. Glad I brought those today. And winter warmed them up for me. Oh, awesome. I'll do that. That's okay. That works. When James and John, the sons of Zebedee, called to him, "Teacher," they said, "we want you to do for us whatever we ask." "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked. They replied, "Let one of us sit at your right hand and the other at the left in your glory." "You don't know what you're asking," Jesus said. "Can you drink from the cup I drink or be baptized from the baptism I'm baptized with?" "We can," they answered. Jesus said to them, "You will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. Those places belong to those for whom they have been prepared." So the two texts today do an interesting thing. They elevate the invisible, as well as talking about those you would think would have all the power and putting them in a whole different position. After James and John ask to be elevated and be the ones who rule over the coming kingdom, Jesus says to them, if you want to be great in my kingdom, you will be a servant to all, turning on the head everything they expect of authority and power. We may think, if we've grown up in the church, that we understand these things, that we know in our hearts it is to be a servant, to be great in God's estimations. Yet we are so swayed by the culture at large and what they say is important, that we turn our attention often to the things that have authority, power, money, a certain kind of look, a bandwidth on whatever kind of media we draw our attention to. And we can't help it when we watch them over and over to begin to think that they are better than we are, or that they are somehow more deserving, or that they are smarter, or that they are wiser than we are. Because over and over again, we see this affirmed, that these people are up front, these people are in charge, these people must know what they're doing. But in our culture today, our ideas of these things are shifting. If you look back over the last 60 years in American history, many people will point to Watergate as one of the moments when things turned. We never could have believed that a president would have cheated like that. And our faith in our institutions began to crumble. Yet we still seek after power. We still want to feel like our way is the right way. And Jesus is over and over again in his interactions and in his stories lifting up the people that culture considered invisible. And children, in the first part that Marley mentioned, were one of the great invisibles of that culture. So when you think about Jesus, and especially the narrative of Jesus now, where many churches talk about Christians being in power, Christians being the ones who rule, Christian law being the authority of the land, you have to go back and look at how Jesus talked about these things. Was he ever one to lift up his way and to put others down? Instead, he took the unexpected and he lifted them up. And in my estimation, there's nothing more radical than lifting up children. In this culture, it is estimated that between 30 and 50% of all children died in the first year of life. Many people didn't name their children until they were 2. And in some cultures today, the life of a child is considered as very small. A friend of mine was in a different country in the sub-Saharan Africa and hit a child and killed him. And of course, it was a horrific event. The reparation was 1 goat, because the culture was so used to their children dying. They had a pathway. Now, we don't understand that 1 goat made up for the life of that child. But we do know that it has been normal in history, and still in many places today, to lose a child. It's a normal part of experience, particularly in areas of extreme poverty. How many of you came from a time or place where your parents lost a child? Some of you, quite a few of you. We know that pain and that loss, but we also need to understand that in this particular culture, in Jesus' day, there were very complex ideas about children. The scriptures talk a lot about not sacrificing your children, and yet there's the story of Abraham and Isaac. The reason it's mentioned so often is we have to understand it was normal in that culture. And there have been archaeological sites where they found that hundreds of children were killed. Infanticide. But that was a normal part of how they did things. Now, we might gasp at it. We might find it to be horrific. But how many children do we allow to die in our culture? From food deserts or malnutrition? From poverty and the lack of prenatal care? The life of children is very political in our modern divisions. And yet we don't seem to have much discussion of what it is to take care of a child after birth, to educate a child, to provide a means for children. And so we ought not to stand in too harsh a judgment over this time and place. But in Jesus' day, as we go back to understand the context of this story, nearly everyone had lost a child. The disciples tried to keep the children away from him as they were coming to swarm him. They stood in the way and they said, "No, you go back to your parents." Didn't even grow up with the whole moniker of you should be seen and not heard. You didn't listen to children. The pendulum has swung so far that some will say, all we listen to is children now. And there's a whole swing back, I understand, against a child-centered parenting approach. But in this culture, to try to understand what Jesus was doing, it is radical that he said to his disciples, "Don't you ever stop the children from coming to me." Do you see how strong his language is in this story? Don't do it. The children are my priority. And in fact, the children are your teachers. Don't we know that from listening to the Lambs and Winter and Ivy and Ari every week? They are our teachers. How many's favorite part of worship is the children's message? Because they teach us things. Won't you chuckle all week about Winter with those glasses on and how she saw things? I know I will. Because the children are our teachers when we remember that the culture's priorities are not God's priorities. That the culture's obsession with wealth and beauty and status have nothing to do with God's economy. That God is calling us to be his children. And if we want to be great, really great and powerful in God's kingdom, we're to serve each other. That service is the path to greatness. And that's delightful, because that's how we were made. Unfortunately, for many cultures, even today, physical abuse of children is common. And when Jesus said to the disciples, "Wake up, wake up, the children have something to teach you," I believe he's also saying to us, the children have something to teach us. And this reminds me of our generational challenges today. Because how often have we raised a child who says something back to us that we don't know where they got it? I didn't raise you that way. But maybe we did if we raised them to think, to be independent, to express their own ideas. I just spent the last weekend with my youngest daughter, who had to correct me at least 5 times on how I spoke to people. Five times. Mom, you can't say that. Mom, maybe you should say this. Mom, you have to be careful with this. Because things change. And if we're not open to listening to our children and learning from them, we get stuck. And if you don't have children of your own, believe me, the children of this church will help educate you. Are we listening to them? Are we listening to their priorities? What burns as passions in their hearts? How they see the world? They're here to teach us. And we have the great privilege of serving them. What an honor to serve the group that was seated here today. And deep and abiding thanks to those who do it every single week. To the people in our nursery. To Sheila and the team that do Godly Play. To those who organize the committees and the curriculums, the VBS, and all the ways that we serve our children. Thank God for you. This is our future, but it's also our present. Many times I've heard people say, well, I wasn't raised that way. Have you ever said that to someone? Have you ever felt it? No, you weren't, and that's okay, because culture shifts and changes. And the next generations have things to teach us about what God is doing right now. Because what God is doing right now is different from what God was doing in 1968. And what God was doing in 1984. And what God was doing in the year 2000. It's different now. Do we have ears to hear and eyes to see? Are we listening to our children? Because God is already teaching them things that we need to learn. Serving each other is one of our great challenges, particularly when the other that we're serving is cranky. And we've all been there. How do you handle someone who's cranky in your life? Someone who's maybe overstimulated. What's the phrase now? You've gotten too much and you can't regulate?
Dysregulated.
How do you serve someone who's dysregulated? It's a good phrase. Are we learning what that means and how to adapt? Because God is teaching us through these things. God is showing us different ways to imagine the invisible. And are we willing to put on those glasses or that filter to begin to see as our children see? I think about the art that I looked at this week of God with the children of the earth, and it was so beautiful to see some of these artists and how they portrayed this vision of Christ lifting up the children, of Christ paying attention to the invisible, of Christ saying to those who are put down and put upon that these are the people that are important in my kingdom. Yesterday, I just finished a book by Sibo Campbell called The Sky is Full of Elephants. And it imagines a world where all the white people walk into the ocean and drowned. And what would life be without dominant white culture in America? It had a lot of really powerful things to say. Because we get so stuck in our ideas about what's right and what God is saying that we stop listening to people who are different from us. And one of the reasons I think Jesus lifted up the children is to help us understand that there's always something new in God's kingdom. And there's always an opportunity for us to learn. I had the great privilege over the last 5 days of reading the applications of 18 kids who applied for our family scholarship. We service kids who are somehow on the spectrum or have an IEP. And we're the only scholarship at my home high school that does this. And to read these applications, I was completely a wreck, sobbing. One of the students has gotten a B average, held 3 jobs, earned honors in 3 different areas, while being home without a home for 2 years, living in her car for 2 years. There are so many children in our community that are invisible, that are doing so much with nothing. And one of the things about the book is, why do we let such injustice continue? How can we stay comfortable when there are children that are living in their cars? When there are children that don't have enough to eat in our community? How can we feel like we're following Jesus when we allow this in our neighborhood? It breaks my heart, but it also says we got to do something. We have to do something for the children in our community. Our church has so many resources, and we do beautiful things. But can we also be a voice in our community to say, no, we're not going to have any hungry children here. No. Are we willing to go to city council or the school board and keep speaking up and say, no, it's not good enough. It's not good enough that there are kids living in cars. We are not going to remain comfortable when there are kids that have to go through things like this. Isn't that part of Jesus saying, let those kids come to me? And how are we stopping the kids from coming to Jesus? How are we putting our bodies in the way and saying, no, you're not welcome here? Because we're doing it. Even though we can say to ourselves that we're welcoming, we tolerate those kids having a lot more hardship than we do. So I'm not telling you what we're supposed to do, but I'm inviting you to pray about it and to not let us be comfortable if the kids aren't able to come to Christ. Because Jesus' words for the disciples were so strong. Don't you dare keep those kids away from me. Don't you dare keep those kids away from me by hunger, or an unsafe living environment, or a lack of education, or God forbid, student debt. I spent the weekend with a woman who has $250,000 in debt from training to be an OT to serve us. People, that is not right. We can't be comfortable with stuff like that going on. But how do we pick? You've got to listen to what God is calling you to do. Whatever I say today isn't important if the Spirit isn't making it ring true in your hearts. What is God calling you to speak about, to advocate for, to call for justice, to make a place at the table? That is what I want to support in you, what God is already calling you to. Because I know for many of you, it's a lot. And it may be for some of you even to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be doing so much. Maybe you ought to focus. I don't know what God is calling you to do. But I know that the scriptures convict us and remind us that we're called to welcome the invisible, to be the people that notice. Maybe notice when someone doesn't look right and need a hand up. This passage is so powerful for us because it's a radical vision and it's a dangerous inclusion, because we have to make some waves to make a difference. And a lot of us do not like to make waves. We want to be nice, we want to be liked, we want to pretend like everything is great. And so it challenges us to use our voice, to see the invisible. Jesus takes the hands of the children in our community. Are we going to also join and take their hands as well? I want to challenge you, if you don't do anything else, to learn the names of our children here. And when you see them, to greet them by name. They are not invisible. We're here to love them. Let's do it together by God's power.